All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Crypto Rundown, joined by Bryce Paul. Bryce, welcome back. How you doing, man?
How's it going? Happy New Year. Feeling good. The Bulls are back on parade. There we go. Standing O. I'm back. No, man, it's been a fantastic start to the year, dude. I mean, some of these coins, we put out the AI portfolio towards the end of last year, and some of those coins like AGIX are up 300% since we put it out. Ocean Protocol is up big. There's been a lot of coins in the AI. Fetch is another one, AI sector that have been pumping. But it's not just that, right? We've seen some of the old dogs, like the light coins of the world, up 55, 60% over the course of just the past 3 weeks, which that doesn't typically happen in bear markets. I think we're actually rounding out this bear market, and we're entering a new phase. I'm not going to call it a full raging bull market yet, but the tides are shifting. A lot of coins are starting to wrestle with their 200-day averages and pop above it. So we've been patiently timing our entries and our exits, and I really am very confident that the crypto market's turning around. So I'm happy to start the year off like this. There's an old saying, it goes, so goes January, so goes the rest of the year, in the markets at least. And January's been off to a rip-roaring start. So what are you thinking here? Do you think that this is the end of the bear market or just a dead cat bounce?
I'm going to agree with you that there is a turn in the market, but it's not a turn around. It's just a left turn. So I think the pain is over. And I believe the suffering is just beginning. So
Lovely.
As Brendan would put it, the bear market is the punishment, but this is kind of the bleed out from it. And, who's going to be able to heal up? And as you've always said in the past, if they don't scare you out, they're going to wear you out. Well, the fear is over, and now the endurance part comes in. And I think we're going to see a lot of up and down chop. We're going to see several failed breakouts that are really going to crush people's spirits. But when you look back on it, it's going to look like every other year after a bear market, and that's the accumulation phase. And we've known about this since the early 1900s. This is how these market cycles work. There aren't V-shaped recoveries. There's accumulation periods. And in all our travels, over the past year, we've met several new funds, banks, institutions ready to place bets in crypto this year. And they're going to do it very quietly, very strategically. But there's so much money on the sidelines right now that it's trying to squeeze into this market that's just barely at $1 trillion today. And that's going to push prices higher just from the amount of money trying to get in. So I think we're going to see a very quiet 2 to 3x appreciation this year, even in an accumulation phase. But it's going to come in, maybe 1 or 2% moves a day over a consistent amount of time. I think many people who are trading this from a crypto hedge fund perspective are going to be taking profits and buying back cheaper. The name of the game this year is building a cash position to make long-term bets in towards the end of this year, in my opinion. But with so much devastation last year in terms of crypto hedge funds and trading firms, with 3 Arrows getting destroyed and Alameda now being out of the game, those are 2 enormous market manipulators that are now gone. So
yeah, basically Sam Bankman-Fried was taking your Bitcoin, the audience, taking your Bitcoin, your Ethereum, selling it for cash and giving it to Democratic politicians. So now that he's out of the game, you would think that there's going to be less sell pressure. And one of the other
pressure and more organic price movement.
Right. But there's still Binance, right? Binance is still in the game, and the level of, market manipulation that kind of goes on there, it's still a question. We don't necessarily have any definitive proof, but they're still in the crosshairs of, regulators globally. And I did see the other day that there was a huge $4 billion TWAP, right? A time-weighted average price order that was executed with the Binance stablecoin, BUSD. And it seemed to be about one entity that from about $17,000 per coin all the way up to about $22,000 per coin. spent about $4 billion worth of the Binance stablecoin, and they were buying just Bitcoin. So to me, we might be able to retrace a lot of that move. That might have been kind of an artificial, manipulated kind of move from Binance, which, we're not pointing any fingers. We're not, confirming or denying, but, so people were showing charts over the weekend about the cumulative volume delta, the CVD, which is a new indicator I encourage everybody to check out on TradingView. And it shows you the amount of market orders that basically come in on one pair. And if that market order is a sell, it'll tick down. If it's a buy, it'll tick up. And you could really see there that, basically there was a huge amount of buying, and it was only being bought with BUSD, which is abnormal. Typically, if it's an organic move, there'll be some tether that is spent. There'll be some USDC. There'll be some DAI. There'll be some, Coinbase USD. There won't just be $4 billion of one coin, right? So this is where you're like, okay, maybe there's something a little fishy with this move. So the jury's still out. But one of the other things that I saw was a chart, and it said historically a weekly candle close with a 20% gain. So basically, if you have a 20% week in crypto or in Bitcoin, but it's following a 6-month or longer bear market, and that bear market was a 75% or more decline, this has always resulted in a bottom having put in for the market. So last week, we had our first 20% weekly candle since the bull market of 2021. And so now that we had, a big drawdown of 75% or more over the course of the last, I think it was about 18 months practically. Now we got a 20% gain. It could be indicative of a bull market starting to at least rear its head. But on the other side, some of the stuff I wanted to get into today was there's still some headwinds, right? I mean, kind of first and foremost, we have Gemini, which is the Winklevoss brothers, the twins, and Genesis, which is a subsidiary of DCG, which is arguably the largest company in crypto. They're now embattled in a lawsuit with the SEC because of one of their products that they were offering, Gemini Earn, where people could, give money into a Gemini account and they could collect 8% interest on that. So the way that Gemini kind of generated that yield was they took customer deposits. This was all part of, the loan agreement, apparently. The jury's still out. Literally, now there's a court case seeing if all of this stuff was above board. They would take the money, they would loan it out. Somebody would borrow it, right? The main borrower was Genesis. Then Genesis was loaning that money out to people like 3AC and Alameda and all that kind of stuff. And so when a lot of those, there was a daisy chain, basically, of like customer deposits being loaned and loaned and loaned, rehypothecated, the same old story. And then once one default happens, a lot of people don't get paid back. And so SEC's coming after Gemini and Genesis and kind of coming after them in this one lawsuit in order to kind of see who's at fault, who has the liability. And Genesis, you and I both know, like, this is we never necessarily were big supporters or advocates or spokespersons for the Earn program, because we always said where there's yield, there's a lot of risk. But I've always thought of Gemini as being a pretty buttoned up exchange. It's regulated in New York, right? It's like the most difficult place to launch a crypto exchange, and they were doing it. And they've got a lot of reputable people on their board. I mean, this to me, Gemini was not going to be one of those guys to fall, and here they are. And this really could be a death blow for Gemini. This could also be a death blow for Barry Silbert's DCG and Genesis. So if this all goes into liquidation and they end up selling off a lot of crypto assets in order to raise money for their bankruptcy proceedings, I mean, there could just still be some overhead and some hangover from this bear market. So kind of, Pete's, to your point, maybe the sharp pain is done, but there could still be a lot of bleed. And I don't know if you guys saw, there was a pretty funny video that Gary Gensler came out. Do you guys see this video? Gary's office hours, he calls it. This was ridiculous. It was he's
so desperate to have people visit him and pay attention to him. He has to do stuff like this.
Yeah, it looked like it was a 3-year-old, supposed to capture the attention of a 3-year-old or something, with all these, crypto needs safety belts and seat belts. Why do electric cars come with seat? It's like, what is the association here? But He's playing to his audience, and he's saying, we're the good guys. We're coming in to clean up the space, and we'll see how it all resolves. I just thought it was a hilarious video.
We as American taxpayers should be extremely upset that our dollars went to the production of that, because while it was a decently produced video, I know how many hours and how many editors were needed to make that. And I can't believe that's what we're spending our tax dollars on. He went as far to compare the US dollar, whether you're trading stocks or bonds, cryptos, or even gerbils. That was a quote. Like, who's writing?
Oh my God.
Who are they hiring? Who are they hiring? There's plenty of talented people out in the space. Like, the US government production department needs to get their shit together, because as a producer,
US gerbils are now securities, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Under
If
that
you're trading
regime,
gerbils,
they will be.
No,
I'm sure he is,
honestly, it's.
I don't want to go into that.
Why is Gary Gensler coming in after all the money's gone on the FTX stuff? Okay, you were talking to them for years. Why didn't you stop it before all the money was gone? Gemini and Genesis. You've been talking to these guys for years, trying to regulate them. Now that the money's gone, now you're going to come in and save everybody? It's like, you guys are a little late to the game. And even the stuff, I watched one of the Bernie Madoff sort of documentaries over the weekend, and it was
the
like
one on Netflix.
It was actually an HBO. It was the one with Robert De Niro. Not really a doc. It was like a.
There's a new one that came out on Netflix. Let me look that up. Actually, people are talking.
Yeah. There's a new one that came out on Netflix, but they're basically saying like the SEC was tipped off about Madoff, multiple times, and never stepped in until the whole thing imploded. And so it's like, you're not doing a good job. Like, if your job is to protect consumers, and you're on, and you're just like not protecting the consumers, I don't know. It's kind of bizarre.
It's called Madoff, the Monster of Wall Street on Netflix. People are saying that's really good. It just came out last week.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out.
I'll say one thing to further your point, Bryce. I'll take the other side of this argument now. The U.S. dollar seems to have run out of strength, and it is retracing quite a bit, and it looks like there's still quite a bit more to go until its next level of support. And I think that could be one of the catalysts that's driving the crypto markets back up. And we've seen Bitcoin move pretty much in inverse lockstep with the rise of the dollar last year. And sure enough, it's showing a pretty tight correlation inversely again this year. So as the dollar falls, Bitcoin goes up. Somebody who had $4 billion worth of stable coins, whether it was Binance or somebody else, decided it's going to give a better value now in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So that's something to pay attention to as well.
Has Bitcoin
if the dollar goes
sideways
sideways,
gold?
Not really.
Yeah, it hasn't been typically correlated with gold. I mean, in theory, it should
gold's
be.
having a big month too with the U.S. dollar retracing.
Yeah, it should be, but it's traded more like a tech stock.
Yeah, that's true, because gold didn't go through the roof when Bitcoin did.
Yeah.
No. Talk about a manipulated market over there.
Yeah, I mean, so all this price action is positive. Obviously, everybody loves to see the green numbers and everything go up. But Coinbase, DCG, Winklevoss, all this negativity. So all your big players, there's still a lot of negativity around it, except for Binance. Binance goes out and claims, CZ claims they're going to hire 20% of their current staff. They're going to restaff, 20% new jobs, new people preparing for the next bull run. I guess you got to keep track of it over the year to see if they truly do start hiring, but everybody else is cutting budgets, cutting back, all that. And Binance wants to grow, which is an interesting point to what you were talking about earlier with the, hey, what's this Binance coin flooding the market? What's up with that? So interesting.
Well, I think a big part of that is they didn't overextend themselves last year like many other companies did. And they weren't doing a ton of marketing. They weren't doing a ton of appearances. They weren't spending tons of money on Super Bowl commercials, if I remember correctly.
I don't think they got any super commercials.
They didn't. So they've really been kind of playing it close to the vest the past couple years. And now they have money in this condition to grow their company, where everyone else who shot their wad is now having to contract because their customer base is, down 80%. Their support tickets are down 90%.
Yeah.
And they just can't justify the cost to their shareholders. Where Binance, they're always kind of a step ahead of everybody else. So I'm not
And
surprised to see this.
They're still, they're still private, right? They're privately owned by offshore money, and probably most of it's CZ. And so, at the end of the day, it's kind of like a dictatorship versus a democracy. If, Coinbase was a democracy, Binance would be a dictatorship. Kind of like in the same way that America is a democracy and China is kind of a pseudo dictatorship, although they call it the Democratic or the Communist People's Party or whatever. They think that they have some type of republic there, but I think that at the end of the...
I would say it's a Singaporean dictatorship. It's a benevolent dictatorship that works out well for the people of Binance. I know I've made quite a bit of money there, so I don't want to call them the Chinese Republican or Chinese Communist Party. It sounds a little harsh. But, yeah.
Philosophically, is there a path for CZ to now try and come to the U.S. government, and try and be the face of crypto regulation? Because if there's any movement forward in the U.S., it's coming, right? Gensler's making his videos and all that shit. With SBF out, is that the play for him, instead of being like, no, I'm not in the U.S., I'm not regulated? Pizza always says Binance U.S. is crap, he doesn't want to be there. So is that an option?
I did hear Binance US was approved to buy the assets of Voyager. So that was something where they tried to get stopped, and then it didn't get stopped, and it got approved. And so if that's any sort of forecast, I think it would probably be giving the benefit of the doubt to Binance. I think that it's just tough because, the U.S. is so close. The regulatory bodies are so closed off to any offshore stuff. We still don't have a Bitcoin ETF. Why? Because most of the price discovery and most of the volume is traded offshore on venues that, the U.S. can't influence necessarily. And so until we get more volumes onshore in America, in good exchanges and good incentives to trade in America, we're going to really still have an uphill battle, because the American regulators are not going to trust somebody that they don't have necessarily inroads with. I don't know. That's just the way I look at it.
Yeah. And it's really tough to tell a guy who's not playing by any rules to start playing by rules that he doesn't agree with and that don't make sense. So if they were to pass very favorable, fair rules, I think CZ, being a logical person, would see the benefit towards, following them if they didn't entirely crush his business. But watching what's happening with several U.S. companies right now, whether it's a BlockFi or Coinbase getting sued for their earned product or providing staking rewards for consumers, it's basically a death blow to have a crypto company operating in the U.S. if you have a good foreign market. There's no reason for him to come here ever at this point. So, a year can make a lot of difference, but at this point if you're CZ and you're sitting on more cash than you know what to do with, and you're running your company right, and you're about to take all the top talent in the entire industry that just got cut, not just in Web 3, but Web 2, and everywhere else around the world, I think coming to the U.S. is the least of your worries. You're building a monopoly of your own.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times people say crypto and Web3, it's not already for the developed world. It's for the developing world, right? People in America, they could use credit cards. They could use, bank ATMs and all this kind of stuff very easily. They could get loans like this. But that's the developed world. And I think CZ and Binance is kind of saying, we want to develop this technology and these infrastructure, for Africa. He spends a lot of time in Africa and for developing nations in Southeast Asia and all that kind of stuff, where he's like, that's kind of more my focus. I don't really care about going into getting American business. I'd rather, focus on South American, African, different business model. And I hope they succeed. It just seems... Well, they have been succeeding. I mean, they were the quickest company to $1 billion in profit ever. I think that was the statistic. So they've clearly been succeeding. I just think to succeed in America with Binance is just going to be a really difficult task. But they have my hopes, I suppose. But that doesn't get many people anywhere.
Yeah, you hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which materializes first. But with that said, they've been doing really well, to your point. But if they're able to continue this over the next 10, 20 years and really transform a lot of the regions of the world, and maybe the U.S. playing catch up with them and trying to get on board with their system versus the other way around. We have a few people in Congress now that are trying to educate their constituents and saying, hey, the U.S. is at serious risk of being left behind by the rest of the world by how fast this movement is growing. And we've seen more private companies in the U.S. and controlling status quo participants in the U.S. start paying attention to crypto and blockchain, as we witnessed at Money 2020 last year. There's some of the leading national banks now have head of digital asset positions and even positions in some crypto and equity positions as well, and plans to launch their own exchanges, etc., and participate in one way, shape, or form. But if the government doesn't get involved to allow for that to happen, and provide, some kind of security for customers, whether it's a crypto denominated FDIC or something like that, some kind of insurance to get people comfortable participating, the U.S. could be left behind in a decade or two, and CZ could be up there with a Nobel Peace Prize in economics for being able to foresee all this stuff. That's a true possibility.
Yeah, and it
there's a
makes
headline
sense.
for you: CZ for Nobel Peace Prize. You heard it first year on Crypto 101.
I love the prediction. Prior. You're like Neil deGrasse Tyson on Joe Rogan and gave like a bunch of 2050 predictions, and he's like, whether I'm right or not, it doesn't matter. It's like, so there's
I won't be here.
2050
Yeah, he ain't gonna be around. I won't be here in 2050 either.
But it's a good thought of the developing, working with the developing world, and everybody that is anti-crypto is like, oh, well, Binance and crypto scams, wire frauds, all this and that. It's like, well, how, is our banking system, not involved in some sketchy stuff? Like Wells Fargo just got fined again, for like consecutively every year or something. They keep getting fined for doing shady shit with their mortgage loans and all that. So
yeah,
there's fraud,
I
fraud and bad people everywhere.
Yep.
Check out this story. I met a guy recently who, at the peak of his wealth, was worth like $150 million or something. He had several different companies in different industries, not crypto related, but he was doing a deal for $1 billion investment from an overseas investor. And his banker is JP Morgan. So they send the first tranche of $100 million through these foreign banks to JP Morgan, and it never arrives. And the guy goes to his banker and he goes, where is the money? This is a wire, a bank wire, through a series of central banks and regulated banks all throughout the world. And JP Morgan, after 2 weeks, says, we literally can't find the money. We have no idea what happened to it. We never received anything. And the investor on the other side's like showing him paperwork from his bank to like prove like the money was actually sent. And somewhere in the banks, $100 million was stolen by a bank. So,
or seized by the government. It could be seized by some FinCEN.
I mean, if it was seized by the government, at least one of the banks in the chain would say, like, here's a seizure notice. Like, this is what happened. You would think, but it's literally everyone just shrugged and said, I don't know, never seen it. So obviously the investor didn't send the other $900 million. The deal was canceled. This guy's business collapses. Long story short, he's not worth $150 million or anywhere close to it anymore, thanks to the banking system.
That sounds pretty gnarly. I would probably sue.
Yeah, but what is he going to do? No one can
can't
find the
afford a
money. No
lawyer.
one will admit to it.
Can't afford a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. So thankfully there's Bitcoin now for these international kinds of things. If you need to transfer $1 billion cross-border, you can do it in a couple blocks.
That's why all right. Last thing, Three Arrows Capital, recently bankrupt, failed, looking to raise money for a new exchange.
Not touching it with a 10-foot pole. Not touching it with a 10-foot pole. I mean, God bless.
Come on, they learned from their mistakes. They learned from their mistakes.
Man, they got some fucking gall to come back and ask for money for an exchange after they almost single-handedly were the complete kindling and gasoline and match for this entire downfall. They still owe a lot of people a lot of money. So to me, this is not a good sign. I would not endorse it. I mean, they're just human, right? At the end of the day, they ran their shop and they turned, a few million into a few billion. So that's really commendable, but they didn't keep it, and they brought a lot of people down with it. And there's still lawsuits and bankruptcy proceedings. And so to me, it's like, how are you going to be able to, focus on this? Who's going to trust you? Right? I mean, the people that would trust you are the people that don't know you. And that's not really a good sign. So in CoinFlex, Pete, have you ever used CoinFlex? Do you know any self-respecting person or trader who's ever used CoinFlex?
No. The owner of CoinFlex is actually based in San Diego. So I've talked to him before.
Oops.
But I've never used the platform because U.S. citizens are not allowed to use it. So
what?
That's that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're a U.S. citizen making an exchange for non-U.S. people, but you're definitely not trading there, right? Like and it's like, I don't know. It just seems weird. It's pretty obvious that I even saw the guys from Wintermute, who are one of the other large market makers in the space. Again, hopefully these guys aren't completely fraudulent like a lot of the other guys were. But he was like, I wouldn't, anybody who is fundraising on CoinFlex and contributing here, we're not going to do any deals with anybody that touches this deal. So it's like people are kind of drawing that line in the sand of like, hey, if you're going to participate in this new Three Arrows Capital venture, we're not even going to talk to you. So it's guilty by association, essentially. It is what it is.
Yeah. VC is a lot like high school. If you have the wrong friends, you get cut out from not invited to the parties. Yeah.
But they got some nuts on them. I mean, hey, you owe people billions of dollars and you're asking to raise a few million. Like it just doesn't seem logical. But what do I know?
Yeah. Crypto's an unforgiving space. You make one mistake, no one will ever trust you again. That's the reality of it. Right or wrong.
Yeah. And
that's how it is.
Once you make $1 billion, you just think, like, that was easy. Like, I can do that again. Like, it's just a fathomable amount of money. Once you see it, it's
well, it probably could. They know all the right people and strategies and everything.
No, they can make it. They just can't keep it, like Bryce said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to close your positions this time.
They couldn't swear off the leverage.
Positivity, closing out as your producer, I really, really felt the emotional pain of what happened in November. I felt it from our guests trying to schedule people to come on the pods. And I have to say, leading up to Christmas, and then what happened last week, I felt that shift in sentiment from our guests, from you guys. The positive vibes were here. Whether this continues up or down or sideways, I definitely feel a shift in sentiment from whether it's Twitter, the podcast guests, and you guys. It's a good time to be here, learn, and I'm excited to take on this year with you guys.
Let's make some money this year, TiVo.
All righty. We'll see you next week.